Not your average tabletop. Woohoo!
Welcome to Not Your Average Tabletop. I'm Zach, and for today's rules recipe, I'm going to be looking at the game Pandemic. The ingredients that make up Pandemic are some infection cubes, some cure markers, different pawns, player deck cards, infection cards, and also some roll cards and reference cards. To set up Pandemic, you'll first want to place the board out into the middle of the table where everyone can see it. Then, you'll want to separate out the research stations and place one on the Atlanta space. After that, you'll want to sort out all the different disease cubes and put them somewhere on the table as well. After this, you'll place out the outbreak marker along with the different cure markers. Then you'll place out the infection rate marker and infect 9 different cities with the infection deck. The first 3 cities you draw will all get 3 infection cubes of those colors. The next 3 cities drawn will have 2 infection cubes of their color placed in those cities. And the final 3 cities drawn will have 1 cube of each of their colors put into those cities. After all this has been done, you'll give each player a reference card, a roll card with a pawn of the matching color, and also after taking the epidemic cards out of the player deck, deal each player a specific number of cards based on the number of players in the game. After cards have been dealt out, you will decide what difficulty level you want the game to be, and then put a specific number of epidemic cards into the player deck, and you will do this by taking the total player deck and splitting it into equal amounts equal to the number of epidemic cards you choose. Once the deck has been split equally into as many piles as you wish, you'll put 1 epidemic card into each of those piles and then shuffle each one and stack those piles on top of each other and put it in the player deck part of the board. Once all of this has been set up, you can get ready to begin play, and you'll determine the start player by looking at the population on the city cards in your hand, and the player with the highest population card goes first. Each player's turn will be divided into 3 parts. The player will first perform 4 actions, then they will draw 2 player cards, and lastly they will infect a certain number of cities. After a player is done infecting the cities, the player on their left goes next. It should be noted that players should freely give each other advice. Let everyone offer opinions and ideas, however the player whose turn it is decides what to do. Movement actions. The first way you can move is drive or ferry, which is when you move to a city connected by a white line to the one you are in. Then you can do a direct flight, which you would discard a city card to move to the city named on that card. Or you can do a charter flight and discard the city card that matches the city that you will move into so that you can move into any other city. Lastly, you can take a shuttle flight, which allows you to move from a city with a research station to any other city that has a research station. Building a research station. To do this, you'll discard the city card that matches the city you are in to place a research station there. Take the research station from the pile next to the board. If all 6 research stations have been built, take a research station from anywhere on the board. Another important action you can do is treat disease. You can remove 1 disease cube from the city you are in, placing it in the cube supply next to the board. If this disease color has been cured, remove all cubes of that color from the city you are in. If the last cube of a cured disease is removed from the board, this disease is eradicated. Flip its cure marker from its vial side to its eradicated side. Another important action you can take is share knowledge. You can do this action in 2 ways. You can give the city card that matches the city you are in to another player, or take the city card that matches the city you are in from another player. The other player must also be in the city with you. Both of you need to agree to do this. If If the player who gets the card now has more than 7 cards, the player must immediately discard a card or play an event card. Lastly, one of the most important actions in the game is discovering a cure. At any research station, you can discard 5 city cards of the same color from your hand to cure the disease of that color. Move the disease's cure marker to its cure indicator. If no cubes of this color are on the board, the disease is now eradicated, and you can flip its cure marker from its vial side to its eradicated side. After the player has done the 4 actions, they need to draw the top 2 cards together from the player deck. Note, if, as you are about to draw, there are fewer than 2 cards left in the player deck, the game ends and your team has lost. Do not reshuffle the discards to form a new deck. One card to look out for when you're drawing cards are epidemic cards. If your draw includes any epidemic cards, immediately do the following steps in order. You first increase the infection rate marker forward 1 space on the infection rate track. Then you will infect. You will draw the bottom card from the infection deck. Unless its disease color has been eradicated, put 3 disease cubes of that color on the named city. If the city already has cubes of this color, do not add 3 cubes to it. Instead, add just enough cubes so that it has 3 total cubes of this color, and then an outbreak of this disease occurs in that city. Discard this card to the infection discard pile. Also note, if you cannot place the number of cubes actually needed on the board, because there are not enough cubes of the needed color left in the supply, the game ends and your team has lost. This can occur during an epidemic, an outbreak, or infections. Lastly, you will intensify. Reshuffle just the cards in the infection discard pile and place them on top of the infection deck. Note, when doing these steps, remember to draw from the bottom of the infection deck and to then reshuffle only the infection discard pile, placing it on top of the existing infection deck. It is rare but possible to draw 2 epidemic cards at once. In this case, do all 3 steps above once and then again. After resolving any epidemic cards, remove them from the game. Do not draw replacement cards for them. Also note, when drawing cards, there is a hand limit. If you ever have more than 7 cards in hand, after first resolving any epidemic cards you may have drawn, discard cards or play event cards until you have 7 cards in hand. After this has been done, you will have some infections. Flip over as many infection cards from the top of the infection deck as the current infection rate. This number is below the space of the infection rate track that has the infection rate marker. Flip these cards over one at a time, infecting the city named on each card. To infect the city, place 1 disease cube matching its color onto that city, unless this disease has been eradicated. If the city already has 3 cubes of this color, do not place a 4th cube. Instead, an outbreak of this disease occurs in the city. Discard this card to the infection discard pile. Outbreaks. When a disease outbreak occurs, move the outbreak marker forward 1 space on the outbreak track. Then place 1 cube of the disease color on every city connected to that city. If any of them already have 3 cubes on them, do not place a 4th cube in those cities. Instead, in each of them, a chain reaction outbreak occurs after the current outbreak is done. When a chain reaction outbreak occurs, first move the outbreaker marker forward 1 space. Then place cubes, except do not add a cube to cities that have already had an outbreak, as part of resolving the current infection card. As a result of outbreaks, a city may have disease cubes of multiple colors on it, up to 3 cubes of each color. Note, if the outbreak marker reaches the last space on the outbreak track, the game ends and your team has lost. After infecting cities and discarding infection cards, your turn is over. The player on your left begins their turn. Some cards you can draw are event cards. During a turn, any player may play event cards. Playing an event card is not an action. The player who plays an event card decides how it is used. Event cards can be played at any time except in between drawing and resolving a card. After playing an event card, you'll want to discard it to the player discard pile. Note that you can decide at the beginning of the game if you want to place your cards face up in front of you for all players to see, or if you want them to be private so everyone has information to contribute to play discussions. Players may freely examine either discard pile at any time. Game end. The players win as soon as cures to all 4 diseases are discovered. Note that the players do not have to eradicate all 4 diseases to win, just cure them. Once all diseases are cured, the game ends and players win immediately, no matter how many cubes are on the board. There are 3 ways for the game to end and the players to lose. If the outbreak marker reaches the last space of the outbreak track, if you are unable to place the number of disease cubes actually needed on the board, or if a player cannot draw 2 player cards after doing his actions. Some commonly overlooked rules are you do not draw a replacement card after drawing an epidemic card. You may discover a cure at any research station. The color of its city does not need to match the disease you are curing. On your turn, you may take a card from another player if you are both in the city that matches the card you are taking. Your hand limit applies immediately after getting a card from another player. Always remember when playing that each player has a role with specific abilities to improve your team's chances of winning. For example, here we've got the contingency planner, who may, as an action, take an event card from anywhere in the player discard pile and place it on his roll card. Only 1 event card can be on his roll card at a time. It does not count against his hand limit. When the contingency planner plays the event card on his roll card, remove the event card from the game, instead of discarding it. We also have the medic. The medic removes all cubes, not 1, of the same color when doing the treat disease action. If a disease has been cured, he automatically removes all cubes of that color from a city, simply by entering it or being there. This does not take an action. And lastly, we've got the operations expert, who as an action may either build a research station in his current city without discarding or using a city card, or, once per turn, may move from a research station to any city by discarding any city card. You can explore the rest of the roles on your own. I hope that gives you a good idea of how to play the game Pandemic. If you have any questions about the game, please leave a comment below. Otherwise, we will see you next time, and never forget to keep on nibbling.